People often think they know the people they work for. But when Eleanor Harper took a housekeeping job at the secluded Graves estate, she didn't just uncover a billionaire's hidden cameras or his fiancée's toxic betrayal. She uncovered an ancient bloodline. And the 3 little children she swore to protect. They weren't exactly human. In the world of high-end private domestic service, staff are taught to be invisible. They see everything, hear everything, but say absolutely nothing. 2 years ago, Eleanor was drowning in medical debt. Her younger sister Lucy had been admitted to Swedish Medical Center in Seattle for aggressive leukemia treatment, and the bills were stacking up faster than Eleanor could breathe. Desperation drove her to sign an ironclad 50-page non-disclosure agreement with a premium staffing agency. That signature landed her a job at the Graves estate, an imposing Gothic-style mansion nestled deep in the foggy, pine-choked mountains outside the city. The pay was astronomical, triple what any other billionaire in tech or real estate was offering. But the rules were incredibly strange. The master of the house was Theodore Graves. He was a wealthy, reclusive widower who had made a fortune in rare antiquities and private equity. He was devastatingly handsome, with piercing amber eyes, and an aristocratic coldness that made the air around him feel like ice. He was also fiercely, almost obsessively protective of his 5-year-old triplets, Leo Arthur and Clara. Eleanor's instructions upon arriving were bizarrely specific. No natural sunlight was to ever breach the east wing. Heavy motorized blackout curtains were to remain drawn until exactly 8 p.m. No silver polish was allowed on the premises. She was given a specialized synthetic cleaner for the antique cutlery. No garlic or strong aromatics were permitted in the kitchen. Never question the dietary supplements kept in the padlocked, sub-zero refrigerator in the basement, dark, heavy bottles that smelled faintly of iron and copper. For the first few months, Eleanor kept her head down. She dusted the massive gold-leaf mirrors that Theodore mysteriously never seemed to cast a proper reflection in, though she chalked that up to the dim lighting of the dreary mansion. She scrubbed the imported marble floors. She did her job, but then Valerie Covington moved in. Valerie was a Seattle socialite, the daughter of a shipping magnate. She was all sharp angles, platinum blonde hair and Prada heels. To the outside world and to Theodore, she played the role of the perfect empathetic lover. She would drape herself over his arm, cooing at the triplets, bringing them expensive educational toys from Switzerland, and talking endlessly about how she wanted to be the mother they had lost. Theodore, blinded by his own grief over his late wife's mysterious death, seemed to be genuinely considering making Valerie his new bride. He wanted a mother for his children, someone to bring warmth back into their massive, lonely home. But the invisible help always sees the truth. Eleanor first noticed the cracks in Valerie's flawless mask on a rainy Tuesday. Theodore was in his study, taking a conference call. Eleanor was polishing the mahogany banister on the 2nd floor when she saw Valerie walking down the hall with little Clara. Clara had accidentally dropped a porcelain doll, shattering its face on the hardwood floor. The sweet motherly smile instantly vanished from Valerie's face. She didn't comfort the child. Instead, she grabbed Clara's small arm with vicious force, her manicured nails digging into the little girl's pale skin. "You little freak," Valerie hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "If you ever embarrass me in front of your father again, I will lock you in the cellar. Do you understand me? You give me the creeps." Eleanor froze, the polishing rag slipping from her hands. Clara didn't cry. The 5-year-old just stared up at Valerie with those large, unblinking amber eyes exactly like her father's. Suddenly, with a flick of her tiny wrist, Clara ripped her arm out of Valerie's grasp with a force that sent the grown woman stumbling backward into the wall. It was an impossible display of strength for a kindergartner. Valerie gasped, terrified, but quickly smoothed her skirt as she heard Theodore's study door click open. Instantly, tears sprang to her eyes. "Oh, Theodore, darling," she cried out. "Clara had a little accident with her doll. The poor thing is so clumsy." Theodore rushed over, scooping Clara up. He didn't look at Valerie. He just stared intensely at his daughter, murmuring something in a language Eleanor didn't recognize. That night, taking out the recycling, Eleanor found 3 of the heavy dark bottles from the basement fridge completely empty. The label said, "Bovine Nutritional Supplement." But as she rinsed them out, the crimson residue clinging to the glass didn't smell like vitamins. It smelled like blood. Things were wrong in the Graves estate. The children never played outside during the day. They moved with a silent, predatory grace. Arthur could read ancient Latin texts from the library, and Leo once caught a live bird mid-flight from an open window, his small teeth bared in an unnatural hiss before Eleanor shouted and made him let it go. They weren't normal children, and Valerie was a monster in designer clothing, completely unaware of the fire she was playing with. But the true depth of the deception was only just beginning to unfold. A week after the doll incident, Theodore gathered the household staff, Eleanor, the private chef, and Valerie in the grand foyer. He looked exhausted, the dark circles under his eyes, contrasting sharply with his unnaturally pale skin. "I have been called away on urgent business in Geneva," Theodore announced, his deep voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "I will be gone for exactly 1 month. Valerie, my love, you will have complete authority over the household and the children. I trust you to care for my heirs as if they were your own." Valerie placed a manicured hand over her heart, her eyes shimmering with fake adoration. "Of course, Theodore. They are my world. Take all the time you need. We will be waiting for you." He kissed her forehead, knelt to whisper something to the triplets, who stood rigidly in a row, staring blankly at Valerie, and walked out the heavy oak doors into a waiting black town car. The second the taillights disappeared down the winding driveway, the temperature in the house seemed to drop. Valerie turned to Eleanor, her sweet smile dissolving into a cruel, arrogant sneer. "Eleanor, fire the chef. I want him out by noon. I'll be ordering in from now on," she commanded, walking toward the liquor cabinet. "And the freaks are to be restricted to the West Wing. I don't want to see them. I don't want to hear them. Just leave plates of whatever it is they eat outside their door twice a day." "But Miss Covington," Eleanor stammered, horrified. "They are 5 years old. They need supervision. They need to be out of my sight," she snapped, pouring herself a generous glass of scotch. "I'm the lady of this house now. Theodore is signing the prenuptial agreement when he returns, but I'm making a few adjustments first. Do as you're told, cleaning lady, or you'll be on the streets." For the next 3 days, the Graves estate turned into Valerie's private club. She invited over her high society friends, throwing lavish, loud parties that echoed through the quiet halls. Among them was a man named Tristan, a sleazy, slick-haired hedge fund manager who seemed to spend an awful lot of time alone with Valerie in the master suite. Meanwhile, Eleanor defied her orders. She couldn't abandon the children. She sneaked into the West Wing every evening. The triplets were huddled in the dark, refusing the normal food the caterers had left. They were growing weak, lethargic, their skin turning a sickly, translucent grey. "Bee!" little Leo whispered one night, tugging on her apron. His amber eyes were dim. "We need the red juice. Papa says we can't have it without him, but we're so hungry." Eleanor's heart broke. She knew they meant the padlocked fridge in the basement. She had swiped the key from Theodore's study desk months ago, just to clean the lock, never returning it. She hurried down into the cavernous, stone-walled basement. It was pitch black, save for the hum of the sub-zero refrigerator. Eleanor unlocked the heavy metal door, grabbing 3 of the dark, heavy bottles. As she turned to leave, the beam of her flashlight caught something strange on the floor. Scuff marks, clean lines in the centuries-old dust leading behind the massive oak wine racks. Curiosity overrode her fear. Eleanor pushed against the heaviest rack. It swung open silently on oiled hinges, revealing a narrow stone corridor, lit by dim red LED lights. Her pulse pounded in her ears as she crept down the hallway, clutching the heavy glass bottles to her chest. The corridor opened up into a state-of-the-art surveillance room. Wall-to-wall monitors illuminated the dark space. Every single room of the mansion was on those screens. Valerie drinking with Tristan in the parlor, the empty master bedroom, the east wing, and sitting in a high-backed leather chair in the center of the room, casually watching the monitors, was Theodore. Eleanor gasped, dropping one of the bottles. It shattered dark red liquid, pooling on the stone floor. Theodore whipped around. He didn't look like the polished billionaire who had left 3 days ago. He wore a loose black silk shirt. His skin was alabaster flawless and terrifying, but it was his mouth that made her freeze in absolute terror. His lips were stained red, and 2 elongated razor-sharp fangs rested over his bottom lip. "Eleanor," he said. His voice didn't echo. It seemed to resonate directly inside her skull. "You didn't go to Geneva," Eleanor whispered, backing away, her hands shaking violently. You're a vampire." He finished softly, wiping his mouth with a linen handkerchief, the fangs seamlessly retracting into his gums. "Yes, and my children are half-bloods. They require sustenance that Valerie, in her infinite cruelty, would never provide. You're testing her." Eleanor realized the pieces clicking together. The sudden trip, giving her absolute power. "I have lived for over 400 years, Eleanor," Theodore said, standing up. He moved with a speed that made her eyes blur. In a fraction of a second, he was standing mere inches from her. "I do not bring humans into my inner circle lightly. My late wife was murdered by hunters who infiltrated our lives, posing as friends. Valerie presented herself as a savior for my children. I needed to see who she truly was when the master of the house was away." He gestured to the monitors. On the main screen, Valerie and Tristan were in the master study. The audio was crystal clear. "The lawyers sent over the papers," Tristan was saying on the screen, slipping his arms around Valerie's waist. "Once you marry him, we use the sedative. We stage an overdose. As his wife, you inherit the estate, the shell company's everything. The kids go to that special boarding school in Romania, and they never come back." Valerie laughed, a cold, empty sound. "God, I can't wait. Those little freaks make my skin crawl. Just a few more weeks, Tristan. Then the Graves fortune is ours." Eleanor stared at the screen, physically sick to her stomach. Valerie wasn't just a cruel gold digger. She was conspiring to murder Theodore and get rid of the children. Theodore's amber eyes flared with a terrifying, hellish fire. The temperature in the surveillance room plummeted to freezing. "She thinks she is the apex predator in this house," Theodore whispered, his voice a lethal vibrating purr that promised absolute violence. He turned to Eleanor, his gaze softening just a fraction. "You, however, Eleanor, you broke the rules to feed my starving children. You risked your job, perhaps your life, for them." He stepped past her, his silhouette blending into the shadows of the corridor. "Take the remaining bottles to the Triplets," Theodore ordered quietly. "Lock the door to the west wing. Do not come out until sunrise. The test is over. And now, the consequences begin." Eleanor didn't wait a single second after Theodore vanished into the shadows of the basement. Her hands trembling, she grabbed the remaining heavy glass bottles of the supplement and ran up the back servant stairs as fast as her legs could carry her. When she reached the west wing, the Triplets were exactly where she had left them, huddled together on the plush rug of the nursery. Their skin had grown dangerously translucent, their little veins showing dark and pronounced beneath the surface. Without a word, she uncorked the bottles and handed one to each of them. The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The moment the dark red liquid touched their lips, their lethargy vanished. Colour rushed back into their pale cheeks. Their amber eyes, previously dim and hollow, flared with a vibrant, unnatural luminescence. Little Arthur let out a soft, satisfied sigh that sounded jarringly like a purr, while Clara wiped a stray drop of crimson from her chin with the back of her hand. They didn't look like starving children anymore. They looked like apex predators who had just broken a fast. "Thank you, Bay," Leo whispered, looking up at her. His fangs, tiny but razor-sharp, were briefly visible before they retracted. "You're welcome, sweetie." Eleanor choked out her heart, hammering against her ribs. She ushered them into the innermost playroom, shutting the heavy oak door and turning the deadbolt. She pulled the heavy blackout curtains tight and pushed a mahogany dresser in front of the door just to be safe. Theodore's warning echoed in her mind. Do not come out until sunrise. But human curiosity is a dangerous, overpowering instinct. Once the children were safely occupied with a set of wooden building blocks, Eleanor crept out of the nursery and walked softly to the end of the West Wing hall. There was an indoor Juliet balcony that overlooked the grand foyer and the sweeping double staircase. If she stayed flat against the marble balustrade, she could see down into the main house without being seen. For an hour, nothing happened. The distant thumping bass of Valerie's impromptu party in the parlour echoed through the estate. Then, at exactly midnight, the music abruptly cut out. The silence that followed was suffocating. The massive chandelier hanging over the foyer flickered once-twice and then plunged the entire house into darkness. Emergency backup lights kicked on, casting the grand hall in a weak, eerie, crimson glow. Eleanor heard Valerie's voice, first shrill and annoyed. "Tristan, what happened to the breaker?" "Tristan, go fix it. I swear the wiring in this gothic nightmare is as old as Theodore." Footsteps echoed on the marble floors below. Valerie and Tristan walked out of the parlour into the red-lit foyer. Tristan was holding his smartphone, using the flashlight to cut through the gloom. "Relax, Val," Tristan muttered, though his voice lacked its usual arrogant swagger. He sounded tense. "It's probably just a blown fuse from the sound system." "You shouldn't have touched the sound system," a voice echoed from the top of the grand staircase. Valerie screamed, dropping her wine glass. It shattered on the marble, a sound like a gunshot in the quiet house. Tristan whipped his phone light up toward the top of the stairs. Theodore stood there. He was perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back. In the red emergency lighting, he looked like a god of war carved from pale marble. "Theodore!" Valerie gasped, clutching her chest, her face draining of colour. "Darling, you're supposed to be in Geneva. When did you get back? Why didn't you tell me?" She immediately shifted gears, forcing a nervous, trembling smile. "We were just keeping the house lively while you were gone." Theodore began to descend the stairs, his footsteps making absolutely no sound. "You were conspiring to murder me and steal my fortune, Valerie, and you were going to send my children away. I heard every word." Valerie stumbled backward, tripping over her own high heels. "No, Theodore, you misunderstood. It was a joke. Tristan and I were just—" "Save your breath," Tristan interrupted. The hedge fund manager's voice had changed completely. The sleazy, smooth-talking persona was gone, replaced by something hard and calculated. He shoved Valerie aside and reached into his tailored suit jacket, pulling out a heavy matte black firearm, a customized Glock 19. Valerie shrieked, "Tristan, what are you doing?" "Shut up, you stupid woman!" Tristan snapped, never taking his eyes off Theodore. He aimed the weapon squarely at Theodore's chest. "She was just a key to get inside the estate, Graves. The Vanguard security group sends their regards. You've been a very difficult vampire to track down." Eleanor's blood ran cold. Tristan wasn't just a gold-digging lover. He was a hunter, a professional mercenary. Theodore paused on the middle landing. He didn't look afraid. He looked amused. Vanguard, a rebranded corporate offshoot of the old Van Helsing lineage. You dress up in Brooks Brothers suits and pretend you are private security. How far the mighty have fallen. We still use the same ammunition? Tristan sneered. Hollow point rounds filled with liquid silver nitrate. It'll burn you from the inside out. Now where are the abominations? The children. Theodore's amusement vanished instantly. The air pressure in the foyer dropped so violently, Eleanor's ears popped. You will not speak of my children. Theodore snarled, his voice vibrating with a demonic resonance that cracked the glass of the remaining light fixtures. Tristan fired. 3 deafening shots rang out, but Theodore wasn't there. He moved faster than the human eye could process. 1 second he was on the stairs, and the next a terrifying blur of black silk and shadow enveloped Tristan. The gun clattered uselessly to the marble floor. Eleanor clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. Theodore had Tristan pinned against the heavy oak doors of the foyer, holding the grown man off the ground by his throat with a single hand. Theodore's jaw unhinged slightly, his lethal fangs descending as his amber eyes glowed with a predatory fury. You thought you were the hunter, Theodore whispered into Tristan's face, but you walked willingly into the lion's den. Valerie was sobbing hysterically, crawling backward toward the parlor. Theodore, please, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know what he was. Let me go. Theodore didn't even look at her. With a sickening crack that echoed through the vast hall, he snapped Tristan's neck. He dropped the lifeless body to the floor like a discarded rag doll. Valerie let out a blood-curdling scream and scrambled to her feet, running blindly toward the back of the house. Theodore slowly turned his head toward her fleeing form. He didn't run. He simply stepped into the shadows of the staircase and vanished. A few seconds later, Valerie's screams abruptly stopped, replaced by a suffocating heavy silence. Eleanor squeezed her eyes shut, trembling so violently her knees gave out. She scrambled back to the nursery, pushing the dresser tighter against the door, and curled up on the floor beside the sleeping triplets until the first rays of dawn crept through the edges of the blackout curtains. When 8 a.m. finally arrived, Eleanor slowly pushed the dresser away and unlocked the nursery door. The house was dead quiet. She told the children to stay put, promising to return with breakfast. She crept down the stairs, her heart in her throat, expecting to find a bloodbath. But the grand foyer was immaculate. The shattered glass had been swept away. The marble floors gleamed, smelling faintly of bleach and lemon polish. There was no sign of Tristan's body, no bullet holes in the walls, no trace of Valerie. It was as if the horrors of the previous night had been nothing more than a fever dream. Eleanor walked numbly into the formal dining room. Theodore was seated at the head of the long mahogany table, dressed in a crisp white shirt and tailored trousers, reading the Wall Street Journal. A porcelain teacup sat in front of him, though the liquid inside was decidedly not tea. He looked up as she entered. Good morning, Eleanor. You look pale. Please sit. She lowered herself into a chair at the far end of the table, her hands tightly clasped in her lap. Where are they? She managed to ask. Tristan's associates at Vanguard will receive his remains in a lead-lined box by the end of the week. A final warning to stay away from my family, Theodore said, casually, turning a page of his newspaper. As for Valerie, she is currently in the custody of the FBI. Eleanor blinked, confused. The FBI. Theodore offered a small, calculating smile. While she was busy plotting to poison me, my legal team at Graves Holdings LLC was quietly compiling evidence of her massive embezzlement from her father's shipping company. I simply forwarded the dossier to my contacts in the federal government. She will spend the next 20 years in a maximum security federal prison. It is a much more poetic justice for someone obsessed with wealth and luxury, don't you think? He folded the newspaper and looked at her, his amber eyes piercing right through her soul. You defied the lady of the house to protect my children, Theodore said, his voice softening. You discovered my family's deepest secret, and yet, instead of fleeing in terror, you locked yourself in a room with 3 young vampires to ensure their safety. You possess a rare kind of loyalty, Eleanor. He reached into his jacket pocket and slid a thick, heavy envelope across the polished table. I looked into your background, he continued. I know about your sister Lucy. I know she is undergoing experimental leukemia treatments at Swedish Medical Center. As of this morning, Graves Holdings has made a sizable anonymous donation to the hospital. Her medical debts are completely erased, and she has been moved to a private VIP recovery suite with the best oncologists in the country on retainer. Tears immediately sprang to Eleanor's eyes. A massive, crushing weight lifted off her chest so fast she couldn't breathe. Mr. Graves, I don't know what to say. You have 2 choices, Eleanor, Theodore said, leaning forward. You can take this envelope. Inside is $2 million in untraceable cashier's checks. You can walk out those doors returned to your sister, and a specialist of mine will gently wipe the memories of the supernatural from your mind. You will live a long, happy, comfortable human life. Eleanor stared at the envelope. And the second choice, you stay, Theodore replied. Not as a cleaning lady, as the head of household, the guardian of the estate. You will raise my children alongside me. You will know all our secrets. You will have access to my unlimited resources, and you will ensure that no one, human or hunter, ever threatens them again. But you will live in the shadows with us, forever. She thought of the terror of last night, the monsters that walked the earth. But then she thought of little Leo calling her Bee. She thought of Arthur's soft purr when he was finally fed. She thought of Clara's fierce, protective grip. They were monsters to the world, but to Eleanor they were just lonely children who needed someone to protect them from the real monsters in designer suits. She pushed the thick envelope back across the table. I'll need the keys to the basement, Eleanor said, her voice steady for the first time in days. And we need to order more supplements. The children have a growing appetite. Theodore Graves smiled a genuine warm smile that reached his ancient eyes. Welcome to the family, Eleanor. Sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones with fangs. They're the ones hiding behind fake smiles and designer clothes. Forced to choose between running back to a normal life or staying to protect a family of supernatural outcasts, Eleanor chose to remain. In a world defined by predators and prey, she found her place in the shadows, proving that true loyalty is thicker than blood.